Okay, welcome everyone. We are so excited to talk to you today. My name is Chelsea. I'm here with Rebecca, and she's going to be talking to us all about parenting mistakes and how we can avoid them. This is a huge topic that we want to touch on because we know it comes up in a lot of different households or anyone that has kids, obviously. So yeah, I'll do a little short story of myself. So I am a mom of two boys, and I am running a business from home, and love chatting and talking about all these different topics that we're bringing to the Mindful Mama Collective. And like we say in every episode, if you want to catch the full chat and if you missed some of it, we do have a YouTube channel that we can link up in both of our profiles. But for today, Rebecca, take it away on your topic.
Hello. My name is Rebecca. I am a postpartum depression thriver. I teach moms how to live well after having kids and maybe having a difficult experience with it. I am not a natural mom. It took me a long time to love being a mom, and so I use that experience to help other moms maybe experience less guilt about that and find a way to connect with their kids and live well, even though it's not maybe the way that they thought it would be. So today we're going to talk about parenting mistakes, and we're going to start with the parenting part. The parent part. I think the number one parenting mistakes we can make as moms is not taking care of ourselves. My husband watches hockey a lot. It's on almost every night. And if any of those NHL players even get the tiniest bit injured, they get taken off the ice. They go to the back room. They get checked over before they go back in for like a cut or, they roll an ankle or anything. Right away, they take care of the player because they know if the player isn't well, the team doesn't do well. And that's an analogy I take with me in my parenting. And I don't always do this well, but it is so important to take care of yourself. And when I say take care of yourself, I'm not just talking about, oh, go get your nails done, go get a massage, go to the gym. It's different for every person, right? Right now, my self-care is going out and working in my greenhouse. And I've started getting up at 5:30 every morning just to get that time alone without my kids, without my husband, and just having that time of quiet. And for me, self-care these days is quiet. It could be a walk for someone, it could be reading a book, it could be getting a sitter. But it's really important that we take care of ourselves, because when we don't, we're trying to serve from an empty cup. And that's such a, trite or cliche thing to say. But quite honestly, if you're not feeding yourself, if you're not, even like brushing your teeth or taking a shower, if you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to feel good about the rest of the things that you do as well. So for myself, as someone who struggles with depression, a huge thing that's self-care for me is showering and washing my hair. Because I feel clean, I feel new, I feel fresh, and I feel good. And it's something so simple that takes 5 minutes, but that's a huge self-care thing for me. Chelsea, what are some things that you do to take care of yourself and to maybe refill?
Yeah, this is such a great conversation because I totally feel that we try as moms, we try and give when our cup is empty, and then we have nothing left to give, and it just creates kind of wreaks havoc in the body, the mind, everything. And then it makes your whole flow of your day just thrown off. But we don't want you living this way because we know it's not sustainable. Like having the get your shoes on, we gotta get out the door, and this like because we didn't take the time to get ourselves ready in the morning. So now we are yelling at our children to get themselves ready and their shoes on, and they don't understand because they don't understand time. If you have really little kids, and even as they grow, they still don't understand how long certain things take. But yeah, for myself, I found um, getting myself up, like you said, Rebecca, getting myself up, getting myself ready to go for the day before they are coming in and taking up some of my energy that I need to build up from my night's sleep. And so I get up and study myself every single morning. I do a mindset growth program, and that has been huge for me and shifted everything into the habits that I now do, and So showing up and getting myself ready is very important. And then doing the things like you said, like for me, it's the exact same thing as showering. It goes back to like when my kids were born and babies and trying to navigate new motherhood as with a newborn and feeling like, okay, the only time I get to myself is showering. And it still feels like that. And they're 3.5 and almost 16 months. So it's just crazy to think that showering is such a simple thing, but it really does make you feel better. And then for me, it's doing something makeup, hair related that makes me feel confident and kind of sets the tone for my day. So when I find lounging around in my pajamas is fun and like nice and needed the odd time, but it's not something I need to do every day because my confidence is much lower than when I'm ready to go for the day.
Exactly, exactly. And I think what you said about, yelling to get the kids out the door, a lot of that comes from not being prepared for the day. And so I have a friend that sets out everything for breakfast the night before. So her kids will eat their cereal or their toast or whatever they're eating while she's doing her makeup. Um, I like to get up early and do that. It just depends on the person, but there are so many strategies that you can use to just give you that little step up, that little um, way to get ahead and maybe parent from a place of fullness instead of empty all the time. And when we're empty, we end up reacting to our kids instead of responding. And that just, there's so much here, Chelsea. We could talk for hours. We really could.
Yeah.
But what I have found is super important to get from reacting to responding is setting proper boundaries. And this is, I love this book, Boundaries, by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. So they have one specifically for kids. And that's been so helpful for me because they're psychologists. And so they have studied this for many, many years and they know what healthy boundaries look like. So when I'm tired, I will let my kids get away with more because I don't have the energy to do that. But in doing that, I'm letting go of a boundary and it just creates more and more chaos. And so I end up reacting, I end up snapping at them, or I end up feeding them junk food to get them to just shut up. Their entire lives. One of my kids is almost 6 and ends up in our bed still most nights. But I've managed to set boundaries with the other two. And so we're getting there. It's a work in progress. But that's been huge for me. It is setting those boundaries around sleep, setting those boundaries around where food is allowed, right? Like, no, you can't eat in your bed. No, you can't eat on the couch because then the house is a disaster and then I feel stressed. Do you see how it can just become such a spiral, right? Like one thing and it unravels everything. But the cool thing is when you change even one thing, it can go the opposite way. So for me, I stopped having unrealistic expectations around sleep. It just wasn't happening the way I wanted to. I wanted them to go to bed and lay down, and that's that, and go to sleep. And that just did not work for my kids. They need more time to unwind. So I took a step back and I looked at it and I went, okay, why is bedtime such a fight? And what do I need to make it better? And I realized that after 7 or 7:30, whenever their bedtime is, I just need quiet. I don't need them to be sleeping. I just need them to be out of my space because the kids are up early. They're up between 6 and 7. So I've got a long day with them. And I'm a homeschool mom. So I need quiet. And so what I started doing was they have a certain amount of toys and books that are allowed in their room. And after it's bedtime, they get their PJs, teeth brushed, all of that stuff. They have to stay in the room. And I don't care how late they stay up because they're going to fall asleep within a half hour, really. But they're in their rooms. And so that's a boundary that we have set. And we have said, this is how we're doing it in this family. So that now there's no yelling, no me getting frustrated because they're not going to sleep. There are definitely still some delays like, oh, mom, I'm thirsty. Oh, mom, I need this or I need that. But it was something that it doesn't have to be like you need to go to bed and you need to fall asleep now, but I needed that boundary of, it is now bedtime, you need to be in your rooms. Do you see how that little shift changed everything? I no longer hate bedtime. And I have hated bedtime for years. And so when I set that boundary with sleep, now all of a sudden, my husband and I actually get to have an evening together. And so we'll watch TV or we'll chat or we'll read, mostly watch TV. And it just gives us time to connect and decompress. And I think it's so important to get that time with your spouse or your significant other, because your kids are going to grow up and move away. And your spouse is the one you chose for life, right? Like, or the partner that you have. If you want that relationship to thrive, you have to put the time and work in. And so another parenting mistake that I've made in the past, and I've heard from a lot of people, is that you put your kids first in front of your partner. And so your whole life revolves around your kids. And then when they turn 18 and go away to college, you don't even know your partner anymore. And that's easier said than done, right? Like, life isn't easy. It's simple. The answers are simple, but sometimes the work is hard. And so that's another, again, boundary we've had to set, is go, okay, bedtime, now it's spouse time. And that's been huge, huge, huge for us as well. Do you have anything to add on that, Chels, on that note, before I keep rambling on?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote down that I wanted to talk about too, is like the reacting versus responding. I think as we develop into that stage of life of parenthood and everything else, it just kind of comes out sometimes, even if we envisioned ourselves as a parent to not be that way of reacting versus responding. But you see it in your kids. Like, as soon as you raise the level or tone of your voice, they instantly either stop what they're doing, but not in a good way. That, like, I'm speaking from experience of just my children, but it's like they notice you're talking, but they almost kind of laugh because they're not really sure how to take you either. Like I've raised my voice before,
Yeah.
or more so Craig, and they are almost scared because you just scared them with how loud it was. And it's just so crazy how we think yelling is then going to get them to get their shoes on or put their clothes on. Like, that's the struggle right now in our house, is getting my oldest son dressed, and it's just a battle every day. But it's changing the way we did something so that that was a habit, and now we just have to rewrite and change it into a new habit, and then respond versus react, because they respond better when you respond, because all they're doing when you're reacting is just like feeding off of your energy. And it's so true, even an infant or a baby. If, like, when I had my second child, it was like all of a sudden, if I'm now holding my second, but telling my first child to do something, or please don't like touch that or whatever, or you're gonna fall, and then now my baby is like crying because I raised my voice or whatever. And it's just like they just feed off of exactly what you do, and they do more of what they see you do rather than what you say. And I learned that, like, big time. You doing something, so if you aren't using your please thank yous when they see you in a situation, then it doesn't matter how many times you tell them please use your manners, please use your manners, they're never ever going to do it because they don't see you doing it. So that was huge when I learned that. It put it into perspective of like, okay, I need to do before I say to them like what I am trying to articulate, because yeah, it was huge to learn that.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that in how I talk to people. That's something we're working on with my kids right now, is, when I get frustrated with them and snap at them, they now think that they can do that with their siblings, right? And we're not saying you need to be perfect. I mean, I'm far from perfect. I'm trying to be the best parent that I can be. And at the end of the day, my therapist said this to me once: if they have food in their bellies, if they're taken care of, physically, their physical needs are met as best as you can, and they know you love them, you are a fabulous mom. That's the main thing. It doesn't matter if you slipped and swore in front of them, you know, or if you snapped at them. Those things, when they become a habit, become toxic. But when you slip up, that doesn't make you a bad parent. And something that I learned from my parents that helped me so much was that my dad would admit when he was wrong and he would apologize. And this is a very proud man. I love my dad, and he and I would get into it a lot because I'm a daddy's girl. But I remember there were times when we had a fight, and before he went to bed that night, he always had to walk by my room. He would come in and we would chat, and he would apologize for his end. And I think it's huge for our kids to see that. Instead of just making a mistake and pretending it didn't happen, let's say, hey, mommy snapped at you. And I'm sorry, the noise was very overwhelming for me. Identify what it was that caused that. So, was it that they weren't listening? Was it that there was a TV on and the kids were screaming? Was it that you hadn't had your coffee or your lunch? Identify why that's happening in your apology, and then say, I will try to do better next time. Because I think when we can do that, we then give our kids the tools for their relationships as well. So, a rule we have in our family is we don't yell. I mean, there are times we do, but one of our family rules is we don't yell, we don't slam doors, and we don't lock the door on each other. Because when you're yelling, you're saying, you are beneath me. And so that is something we do not do in our family. If mommy does it or if one of the kids do it, there is an instant we're stopping everything and we're going to have a conversation about this. And the other thing is, with my younger ones, you know, they'll start to cry or scream or hit. And instead of saying, no, don't do that, and scolding them, I've just started saying, use your words. And that has been huge because then they learn how to use their words and work things out, right? And sometimes you have to give them the words. Brene Brown has this really cool thing because her and her husband are both like super smart people, and so they had these things called emotion cards. And so it's a face with like an emoticon face, and then it's got the emotion on the back, and you're trying to teach your kids, this face means this face means this, and giving your kids as many words for emotion as you can. So with my 3-year-old right now, it's, I'm so angry. And rather than getting upset with him, I say, thank you for telling me you're angry. How can we fix it? Because when he's using his words instead of just screaming at me, I can do something with that. But we have to teach them this stuff, right? And that requires us to be somewhat emotionally intelligent. And I know our library has tons of great books on emotions. And so how I went about doing this was literally I went to the library and got kids' books on emotions. And we would read through the books. And I still do this with my youngest because he's not quite there yet. It's just, look, this emotion is sad. This emotion is frustrated. This emotion is angry, right? So they learn different words and it just helps them to explain themselves better and teaches them to communicate well. But the other thing that I've done is I've also allowed them to say, Mommy, I need to take a break before we talk about this. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I get into a fight with my husband, I just need some space, or else the words coming out of my mouth are not going to be good, right? So they are allowed to go to their rooms if they need a minute or 5 minutes or an hour, but when they come out, we are going to talk about it. And so having those realistic expectations for what is my child emotionally capable of? Because if you expect them to be an adult, have you seen adults on Twitter? Like, we struggle, right? We struggle to have to take constructive criticism, to have positive conversations. And so we cannot expect our kids to do that. And that's been one of my biggest mistakes. One of the things that I regret the most is not giving my kids space to be the emotional maturity of a kid. And that's been huge for me. Is there anything there that resonated with you, Chelsea?
Yeah, like I know, I don't even know when I heard this or noticed it, but it's seeing how many adults in our daily lives that are having tantrums, but they're just not like throwing themselves on the floor and kicking and screaming, but they're doing it in a way that they're not expressing how they're feeling with their words, exactly what we're teaching our children, because they don't know how to articulate it, just like our kids don't know how to do it yet. So it's so interesting when you are actually aware enough to notice these things when they're happening throughout your life. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on your earlier piece of like organization and all of that. Like from what we've learned, having a disorganized space that you're living in actually creates so much disorder in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you work from home or you work from the office or wherever you are in most of your day, it's just like organize your space, because then more thoughts, more ideas, more things will come into your mind that will come in and be in an organized fashion, rather than having all of these blocks and this negative stuff come in that is not serving us throughout our day. So I think like that is the biggest piece that I learned, is like organized space means organized mind. And it's so true.
And I hate that phrase, or I hated that phrase in the past, because I'm like, I'm not good at that. I'm not good. But here's another mistake I've made in the past, is not hiring help. And I know that this is not financially feasible for everyone. I've definitely been at a place in my life where I couldn't hire somebody. And so I would trade with other moms. I would say, hey, this week I'll watch your kids and you can go do this. And then next week you'll watch my kids for 2 hours, and we would swap childcare. Or one week I would go to their place and we would tackle a room. And then the next week they would come to my place. So you're not necessarily having to pay for help. But Jen Fulwiler, she wrote the book Your Blue Flame. And in it, she talks about how we used to have multi generations living in our homes. And we used to live in these communities. And North America and Europe, or and some parts of Europe, are the only cultures that separate as much as we do. Most cultures, that baby doesn't sleep in a different room until they're several years old, right? And family units work as family units. It's We live in a very different time. And so Jen Fulwiler says, like, hire the help. If you don't have a community, make one. If you have to pay for it or trade for it, or maybe somebody that is really good at organizing, but they don't like cooking and you love cooking. So you say, hey, can you come tackle this area of my house for me? And I will make X amount of meals for you, right? We're trying to make this accessible for everybody. And that's what we're trying to do here with the Mindful Mama Collective, is give you those small tips, those small changes that hopefully can make a huge difference for you. Um, and with the organizing thing, it can be overwhelming. And someone that has absolutely changed the way I think about my home is Casey Davis. She's a therapist in Texas who had a baby at the beginning of the pandemic. And so she has a newborn. I believe she had two other kids, and she has no help, because literally she had the baby in the first 2 weeks that everything was shut down. So for months, she was on her own, and she's like a licensed therapist. So she knows the warning signs of things and she knows what to do. And so she wrote a book called How to Keep House While Drowning. And Chelsea, maybe we can put that link in the description, because that book has changed my life. And she talks about making your home functional for you. It doesn't have to be spotless. It doesn't have to be completely organized, but it needs to be functional. You need to have systems. And I know for me, when I have those systems, one of my things is I do the dishes every single day, once a day. Not like I don't do the dishes after every meal. I might not even do them after supper. I usually do them after breakfast. And then, because that's when I have the most energy. So when we're tuning into who we are and what our strengths are, and hiring out or trading out the rest, we can really thrive, because everyone comes up short on something. And so when you build that community, you can create a space physically, your home, and emotionally for yourself and your kids to thrive in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think it's just a cool piece, because it's like we're here, we're not trying to be experts on anything. We're just here sharing what works for us, and hoping someone else that's listening will get the same value out of it. And I just think that's awesome, that trading time, if it's not something in your budget that you can afford, but you are recognizing you need help, it's like that's a sign telling you that look for something like another mom or someone, a grandparent, a parent, whoever you can kind of lean on for help, because It's meaning that you are now needing to take some time for yourself, to whether that's organizing a little area of your home so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Or for me, it was like trying to organize the spaces that we were in most often. It was like, okay, the like living room, kitchen, those are the spaces that I was seeing all the time, every day, and they were in constant chaos. So then getting to the point, like you said, it's like, okay, dishes on the counter, that was causing chaos and like almost anxiety for me seeing that. So then it was like, okay, load whatever I can in the dishwasher, run the dishwasher. Then I know when it's clean, okay, we can unload it. And the boys actually helped me unload the dishwasher, or Craig or whoever, which is such a cool piece to kind of add your kids into as well, because then they learn how to clean and organize. And it kind of goes with, we've got a little toy area in the living room. So at the end of every day, and when there's days that the boys are home with me and not in daycare, we then teach them at the end of the day before we go to bed or whatever, we organize and we put our toys away. Like, we know there's a bin for all the wooden toys and there's a bin for all the farm animals. And like, so they are understanding now. And like our 15-month-old, and he's figuring it out. Like, he knows the cars go in the car bin, and we're teaching him that already. So it's never too early to start teaching your kids that, because I feel organization is something that we don't teach enough of. And then, so for me, coming from a house that my mom would literally stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning most nights, like mopping the floors and making sure the dishes were done. And it's such a high expectation on who I should be when then I start owning my own house. And I went almost the complete opposite, because it was like I got so frustrated doing those chores when I lived with them, that it was like, now this is my house, our space, as my husband and I were growing together. And it was like, no, okay, we're tired, we're going to go to bed, and who cares if there's dishes on the counter. And then that kind of got really out of hand, and it was creating like anxiety. So I was like, okay, we need to find that happy medium, or the middle ground of knowing, okay, yes, if we're exhausted, we're going to respect our bodies and go to sleep. But also, we can't leave the house in constant chaos, because then we're finding ourselves like tidying before our house cleaner comes. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. So definitely figuring out what works for you and your family is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And there's one more thing I want to touch on before we go that you kind of mentioned, and that's pendulum parenting. So I know no one's perfect. And we have this joke in our family that we're going to pay for a year of therapy when our kids turn 18 so they can address however we traumatize them. But our parents weren't perfect, and we're not going to be perfect parents. Electricity in a third world country. And my dad did for part of his life too. So their perspective on life and what it meant to raise good children was so different than what, psychology says now. And so I find myself sometimes parenting the exact opposite of how my parents did, just so it's not the way that I didn't like it. And that is not a good reason. There's not a good reason. So we really parent from a place of, we want our kids to be emotionally healthy. And that was not something that was really talked about when you and I were kids, Chels. It was like, here's your parent, you do this, you do that. But I think we've lost something in trying to keep our kids emotionally healthy. We haven't set those boundaries with our kids, and we let our kids walk all over us. Our kids were sick a couple of weeks ago, and when they're sick, they're kind of whiny, but after they all got better, they were still really whiny. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Am I not providing for them emotionally? And then my husband said to me, no, I think they just need to be reminded who the parent is. And I thought about it for a while. I'm like, oh, I hate that phrase, But so they were whining and being really frustrated, and I was getting exhausted. Whining just is so draining, right? And so I just said, that's it. If there is more whining and teasing each other today, there will be no kids club tonight. It's a great program that my kids go to in our town. And that set a boundary for them. And they did their best to get along the rest of the day. And I went, so, some of the stuff my parents did actually works and was good. My kids needed to know, hey, this is our mom and we need to respect her, while also knowing that if something was actually wrong, they could come to me. Right. And that's where one more book, Kevin Leman, He's also a child psychologist, and he's written many, many books, but one is called Have a New Kid by Friday. And it's all about setting those boundaries and parenting out of a place of, I am raising an adult. They are a child now, but when I am done, when they move out, they need to be a functioning adult who contributes to society. And so those would be, yeah, I think those would be my main mistakes that I've made, is the pendulum parent self, having unrealistic expectations for my kids' emotions, expecting them to, or not wanting them to have emotions. And then the other one is having zero boundaries with bed. And so those are all ones that some of them I still struggle with. The pendulum parenting, I've come into contact with that daily, right? But some of them I've conquered, like the fighting the bedtime. And so we're not perfect, like Chelsea said. We're just here for the ride and hoping to encourage our other mamas and raise each other's vibes, and yeah, just encourage each other to be the best mom that we can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. And then also a point I want to just add in is we are all doing the best we can with our current level of awareness, right? So that's exactly what our parents did, is they had a certain level of awareness of how they wanted to. They made it different from then how their parents raised them, and they made it different for how they raised us. And it goes the exact same way as we are now doing it different for how we're raising our kids. And our kids will do it different than the way we did, because you can always take pieces you love from the way you were raised, and then you're also allowed to change pieces that you and your spouse now are creating in the home that you want to do, and how do you want to raise your kids, which is like the coolest thing. And not having blame in that, I think that's the biggest piece. Is when I learned that, it was like, oh, blaming my parents for the way they raised me, and it's like, no, we're not going to blame anyone, because that gets us nowhere. But being grateful for the things they did teach us, and then learning from that stuff that we're like, well, we're not quite aligned on that, and exactly that's not how we're going to be doing it with our kids. But it's also okay to change it up and to raise your kids differently. And if like for me, that was kind of a big piece with my mom. She felt like almost a failure with all of this growth and all of this research and everything that I've been doing. Is I had to say, Mom, you did your best with your current level of awareness, and you did it better than your parents. And so it's just such a cool experience to have, and to have that conversation, because it's sometimes not talked about, and there could be some hatred or like some anger there. And it's like, no, it's just, we need to have a conversation about it, and smooth the water and say, we're just doing it a little bit different. It's nothing against you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So to recap on all of that information, we will definitely link up those books, because I know they will be some great resources. A book I found really, really helpful was The Montessori Toddler. So that one is not only based for people that are trying to do anything in a Montessori way. It's just a different approach to more of a like positive parenting, instead of the disciplining and stuff like that we kind of can get into, and it's more of a negative piece. So there's different ways in there that we can kind of raise our kids in more of a natural way, which totally aligns with me and how we're raising our kids too. So yeah, but like definitely setting those boundaries, like Rebecca said, I think is the most important piece, and organizing, and yeah, just pick one thing and just start there is kind of my advice to anyone trying to kind of change a habit. Really is what it is changing a habit that you've done for a long time. And now you've kind of maybe gotten into a habit that's not a good habit, but just slowly changing it, and be open with your kids, saying, mommy and daddy are not perfect, or whatever you call yourself. We're not perfect, and we're just going to try something a little bit different. Your kids will actually be very understanding when you admit that you're wrong. Like Rebecca said, it's just like admitting that not that we screwed up, but that we're just changing things. And it's okay to do that. And we just are going to now do a habit a little bit different. And I think as long as you're calm and you talk to your child that way, is if they're of the age that they can understand what you're saying, then I think they understand that we're not perfect, and it's okay to be wrong sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us again for the Mindful Mama Collective. We are on Clubhouse every week, Tuesday. We'll be back to a regular time next week of 11 a.m. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for sticking around. We are here to support you however we can. Chelsea has a fabulous, fabulous Facebook group for moms. That link will also be in the description. And of course, reach out to either of us. Our links are probably in the description as well. We're here to help, and we want to add value to your life and give you tangible ways to be the best mom that you can be.
Yes, for sure. And if you have a topic that you'd want us to touch on that is something you're struggling with, definitely let us know. And it may be something that we can share.
All right, we're going to close out the room on Clubhouse. Have a wonderful day.
See you later.